Right. Okay.
Good news. Good news. Good news.
Not all stories online can be trusted. Some are designed to reel you in with misleading facts, extreme opinions, or even outright lies. So, before you share a story with friends or family online, check. Are the spelling errors? Do images or videos look edited? Do the facts seem believable? Do they come from reliable sources? Don't get caught by false information. Take care with what you share. Visit sharechecklist.gov.uk to find out more.
This is a Global Original Podcast. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Full Disclosure with me, James O'Brien, a podcast project designed to allow me to spend a little bit more time than is ordinarily available with some of the people I find most delightful or most interesting in the public sphere, a description which couldn't fit this week's guest better. I speak, of course, of Dawn French. Hello, Dawn.
Hello. Nice to see you.
It's very nice to see you. I have had the pleasure of interviewing you before, and it occurred to me while I was looking back on our previous encounters that I find it impossible to believe that you are as happy and well-adjusted as you always seem.
No, I can be grumpy and stinky, and, you know, I can be over-anxious, I can catastrophise, and I can continue with this list of all my shortcomings.
Good.
But hopefully some of the other stuff outweighs that,
Indeed.
Hopefully.
So how given that context, how have you coped with, or how did you cope with lockdown and the continuing confusion?
Well, oh goodness me, it was frightening, wasn't it? I think I was so afraid at the beginning because I thought there was a giant invisible killer. Well, there is a giant invisible killer, but I thought it was outside my door. You know, I think we all, until we understood it a little bit better, I was just afraid to go out of the door. And I hadn't lived like that ever in my life. I don't think any of us have really much, unless we've been in big wars. And so that was awful. I didn't sleep very well. And I gathered my family in with me. And that part actually was the levelling, balancing part, where we just behaved like ordinary humans, albeit humans imprisoned together. But we were imprisoned in Cornwall, so I couldn't moan about that. It was fresh air outside. There's a wood near us that we could walk the dog in. We ate too much. We had some interesting, robust conversation. Let's put it that way. It's not often that that you're locked in with your two 29-year-old daughters. So I found out quite a lot. And we, as I say, we cooked a lot. We did jigsaws in a rather extreme and violent way. I thought I was a sharer. Honestly, James, I'm not. I'm really? A control freak. Didn't know that.
Well, there you go. That's a discovery. A lockdown discovery.
I thought if I set up a jigsaw, surely, the whole family sit round, you chat, you put a little piece in, you put a little piece in. But once I'd started and I'd invested the most time in it, I didn't want anybody else touching anything in it.
Glory hunters.
Glory hunters, exactly that.
Coming along at the last minute
in to steal my triumphs.
And do a lap of honour around the house. Begin at the beginning, if we may, and then we'll work towards the latest book, Because of You. Your publishers are very helpfully, we have the same publishers actually, so I think I can take the mickey out of them without offending too many people. They very helpfully supplied me with some discussion points, Dawn French, in case either of us ran out of things to say, I think, presumably. Us both being so famously quiet and reticent, this could be a godsend, but we'll work our way towards that. Let's begin at the beginning. In 1957. It was an RAF family you were born into. Very briefly, I never knew that your mother's maiden name was O'Brien, so chances are we're related somewhere back in the
might be. Might be. Well, her father, actually, I think her father had a Scottish accent because he'd spent time in Scotland. But in fact, I think we're Irish. As simple as that.
Yes, this is like all the best people. What are your memories? Because it was an RAF family, wasn't it? Which is something later that you'd have in common with Jennifer Saunders, of course. Did that mean that you moved all over the place and you went to different schools every year, or was it more stable than that?
No, that's exactly what it meant. Certainly in the first part of my childhood, up until secondary school, we moved around a lot. And I was born in Holyhead because my dad was stationed there at the time, RAF Valley, which I think is where Prince William was for a while. But anyway, that's where my dad was. So I was born there. And for the first 4 years of my life, my brother would come home from school speaking Welsh because he learnt Welsh at school. I didn't get to go to school in Holyhead, but he did. And I think there was a situation where the people who were on the RAF camps, like everywhere that we went, were the incomers. So, there was a kind of nice prickly relationship between the locals and the incomers, because whenever you create a friendship, whenever my mum tried to create friendships, local people know that you'll be gone in a minute. So, you're forever trying to insert yourself into friendship groups and so on. So it's quite hard work and you're fairly isolated as a family. But yeah, most of my young childhood was spent traveling around. And my mum did point out to me that we used to sleepwalk a lot, my brother and I. And I think it was a kind of anxiety about changing schools all the time and being the RAF brats, wherever we went. But we were a family together, moving to every place. And one very, I suppose, comforting thing about being in the RAF is that each camp that you go to, the house is exactly the same as the house that you have just come from, right down to the furniture, G-plan furniture, the same layout. Everything is the same except for you're now in Lincolnshire or you're now in Scotland or, wherever, or Cyprus even. We went to Cyprus for 4 years of my young childhood, which was heavenly. I mean, really heavenly. And we only went to school in the mornings because it was so hot. And in the afternoons, I cannot believe this was the case, but it was. My mum was working and my dad was obviously working. So somebody's parents, but somebody that was designated that week to be on kid duty, would pick us up, a whole gang of us, take us to a beach at about 1 o'clock, give us some money for Fanta and, crisps, and then come and get us at 7 o'clock in the evening. So, for 20 kids on their own on the beach, no suntan lotion because nobody had such a thing. Then so we were all nutty brown kids with bleached blonde hair who were in and out of snorkeling every afternoon in Cyprus for 4 years. I mean, what's to complain about there? Nothing.
Well, no. And 4 years is a fair old stretch. So that idea of being dislocated presumably you had proper friends. Do you have any friends from your earliest year, from your school days still today?
No. I have friends from my secondary school because what the services know is that you will need some kind of consistency at some point. You need some kind of security. So they pay for you to go to private school because that's where boarding schools are, so that you can settle. And so my parents thought this was amazing. I'd get to go to, a public school and this was posh and phenomenal. And so they chose a school in Plymouth for me to go to. My brother went to the kind of boy version of it. And we were boarders, but we were in with kids that either had lots of money, their parents had lots of money, or they were posh, or they were in the services like us. So it was a very odd situation, having your schooling with kids that you wouldn't normally meet other than the other service kids. So that did feel strange. We were always a little bit fish out of water with that, but it placed me in Plymouth then, which is where both sets of grandparents were. And I was a weekly boarder, so I could go to grandparents at the weekend.
So, and you thrived, I think, at school. I mean, certainly you won a big scholarship to New York, didn't you? A debating scholarship a little later.
I did, yes. I won a scholarship with the English Speaking Union because, frankly, I wouldn't stop speaking.
No. Well, you're being very modest, but it's quite hard to win that scholarship for the English Speaking Union. That means you get to spend a year abroad in your first year after school, I think.
Yes, it was an exchange scholarship. So, yes, you had to go through a kind of debating competition. Crush and utter love for my drama teacher at school. And she took me under her wing and she helped me prepare for this debating scholarship. I mean, we didn't do a lot of debating at school, but so she had to teach me how you would do it. And she gave me subjects like, you know, the old thing, capital punishment, school uniform, you know, and I had to prepare for that. And actually, do you know what really happened was that you had to have someone who would second you to go forward for the scholarship. And the person who seconded me was Michael Foot.
No way.
Yeah, because he was a local MP in Plymouth. So he seconded me. I mean, I don't think I ever met him, but he was at one of the competitions. In fact, I think he judged it. That's right, he judged the competition. So he seconded me to get that scholarship. So when I left school after my A-levels, I spent a year in New York then, which was amazing.
You presumably then, if it was the drama teacher who was your sort of mentor, you were doing acting at school, so that bug arrived quite early.
It did, but the acting bug was only with her in little private classes after school. You could get a sort of half hour once a week with her. And via that, I did the LAMDA examinations where you stand up and do a little piece and, you know, get your medals and all the rest of it. So, yes, I did do that, although I didn't ever think that would be my future.
Well, no big productions then?
No, tiny little bit of Moliere and, you know, the odd nativity and panto type thing at school, but nothing big. No, nothing big.
So if I'd met you...
Oh, I did do. I'll tell you what I did do. Sorry, James.
Go on.
I did do, mainly because it was in conjunction with the boys' school, which meant that, you know, you got out from the girls and went and met the boys, and that was enough of a reason for me. We did do Henry IV Part 2 with the local boys' school, and that was a huge treat. And I slightly fell in love with Falstaff.
Who did you play?
I played Doll Tearsheet.
Okay, you've lost my scholarship.
Doll Tearsheet. She's like a sort of bawdy woman.
Right.
You know, but lots of bawdy jokes that nobody can understand because they're Shakespearean.
The risk of your child getting measles, mumps and rubella increases when they start nursery and mix with other children. We don't hear much about them anymore because most of us are vaccinated. But measles can infect 9 out of 10 unvaccinated people exposed to it and can have serious complications. Protect your child with both MMR vaccines. Contact your GP to book their first or second dose. MMR vaccines protect. Help us, help you. Find out more at nhs.uk/MMR.
If I'd met you then, as you were heading off to New York, and I said, "What do you want to be when you come back?" What would you have said if you hadn't got the performing bug at that point? What bugs did you have?
I basically wanted to be my drama teacher. I just wanted to be her. So I wanted to teach drama in English, and that's what I went on to train to do, and entered into that with the full intention of being a teacher.
At the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama,
yes.
where you bumped in fairly early on, I think, to another young woman from an RAF background by the name of Jennifer Saunders. I like these moments, but presumably it's hard for you to remember how much of it has become mythologized in both of your memories. Did your eyes meet across a crowded canteen or a script meeting, or did you just rub along for a while and suddenly wake up one day and realise she was your best friend?
Well, do you know, I remember it very clearly because my dad sadly committed suicide, and it was just before I was due to go to college. And so 2 weeks later, after that happened, with my mum propelling me forwards and insisting that I still took my place at college, I arrived in London, having, lived mostly in Cornwall and Devon, at Central School of Speech and Trauma to, this teaching course where everybody had yet again established all of their kind of friendship groups and had started the lectures. And so the day one was something called tumbling. Can you imagine anything worse than that? Which meant you had to put a leotard on. Can you imagine anything worse than that? And so I've got my leotard on. I was like, oh, God. Went into a room, and there was Jennifer on the other side of the room. And she was by then in with a rather beautiful group of girls. There were 2 or 3 of them, all posh, all quite thin, who looked great in their leotards, unlike me. And I remember looking across the room and thinking, oh, well, that's the unattainable group. I haven't got a chance with them. I'll stick with the tubs on this side of the room. And I did do do that. And so I sort of circled her, really. I wasn't that interested in her. I just thought she was a bit aloof and too posh for my liking. I had a massive prejudice against posh people, and she sounded plummy and, whatever. Yeah. I didn't really like the cut of her jib, let's put it that way. And then a few weeks later, we had a mutual friend who had a flat, a really nice flat in Chalk Farm that she was looking for people to share with her, and I needed to move, and Jennifer needed to move. So I remember thinking, I'd like to live in that gorgeous flat, but unfortunately, I have to do it with that posh twit.
and the rest is history, so to speak. You mentioned, I'm surprised to hear you hear that word unattainable, and I don't want to gloss over the loss of your father, but neither do I want you to discuss anything that makes you uncomfortable. But I remember when I interviewed you many years ago, I've never forgotten how much and how constant your father's praise for you was. Not just in the kind of abstract ways, but constantly telling you were beautiful, which I think you feel is a huge part of your sort of psychological foundations.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm more than aware that when you lose your dad, who is your hero, when you're 19, which I was, you don't really get to meet your flawed, grumpy, difficult dad. You don't get that bit. So I'm left with this rather lionized, heroic character. I'm aware that that's a bit unreal in a way, but it is the real experience of a young girl loved by her dad up till that age. And my dad always, he did it to my brother too. It wasn't just to me, but he gave us a lot of confidence. And I think my dad recognized that, a little tubby girl like me could fall into a pit of insecurity very easily. And so he just made sure that I had the armor not to do that. So I'm very grateful for that.
It worked.
It definitely worked.
In the simplest sense. I mean, in many ways, it seems an odd thing to say given how your father's life ended, but you hit the parental jackpot because you've spoken recently about your mum as well. I say I've been mothered incredibly well in my life. Spiky and fiery at moments. We'd fall out and fall back in again, but you never rebelled because you didn't... Or maybe you did a bit, but your this constant knowledge of how much your mum loved you is also a huge part of who you are.
Absolutely. And I think what happened was that it fell to my mum when our little square became a triangle. Yes. It fell to my mum to make sure that she didn't drop the ball. So she did extra parenting, if you like. I mean, without a doubt, certainly in my early 20s, I was a bit allergic to my mum. And I think that having had kids that age, I think that's the norm.
You're reviewing your allegiances retrospectively.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm understanding what it is like to be a mum of a 20-year-old who just thinks that everything you say is just dull and wrong. But then, of course, by being able to have these kind of muscular kind of differences, if you like, to be able to have those and to be able to express them, to be able to have the furies and return to each other and know that that is your scaffolding. Actually, it's not going anywhere. That's what fortifies you. That's what is your fuel, and you're always going to be forgiven. Even if you killed somebody, you're going to be forgiven.
That's unconditional love.
Unconditional love, exactly. And I don't think you know it until some of the conditions have been tested.
Neither do you realise how, perhaps not rare, but certainly not commonplace it is. You just presume every other family is a bit like yours. Yeah,
definitely. I think it was only when I went to college, and ever since, that I have realised some people have a really rough ride of it with parents, and it may not be so immediately obvious. Some people's rather insidious, difficult relationships are to do with the pecking and the disappointment that people are. And, it's that sort of... It's the gradual erosion of somebody's confidence that is such a sin in so many ways. I mean, it's clearer to see the utterly unloved, isn't it? It's clearer to see that. My husband works runs a rehab and works with people with all kinds of difficult problems who are in a pickle about everything. And he says to me very often, the root cause is people that have not been loved properly at all. So they have no idea what their compass is. They don't know where the centre is. So, of course, you get lost. And I'm eternally grateful that whatever happened in my life, and it was lots of things and some tragic things, the compass was firmly placed.
To knit all that together then, I'd presume that when your mother was encouraging you quite forcefully to go to college, even though you'd missed the first 2 weeks in that first year, there was none of that stiff upper lip stuff going on. It was genuinely motivated by what she knew would be best for you.
Yeah, and selflessness.
Yes,
because
really to have you at home comforting
absolutely.
each other.
Yeah, and I think that's what I wanted. Selfishly,
right. Yes.
That's what I wanted. I wanted to be with her, and I wanted to be going through this grief together. But I think she knew that I had long to go to college and that I would recover better there. And what she also knew was that if I stayed at home, we could tip into, I don't know, a kind of mutual grief where we didn't heal each other, but we sort of dragged each other down. And she didn't want to be a burden in any way. I mean, what it meant was that first year, especially at college, I just went home a lot. I went home a lot at the weekends. And it's quite a long way from London to Devon, it was then. But I used to check on my mum quite a lot, and she would check on me quite a lot. But that's all right.
It's the month when everyone's mind is fully focused on love. So tune in for brand new Celebs Go Dating on E4. And the great entertainment doesn't end there. Oh no. As well as celebs finding love or finding themselves in cringeworthy encounters, E4 is packed full of new entertainment and bingeable programmes like Teen First Dates, Celebrity Big Brother Australia and The Real Dirty Dancing. Brand new Celebs Go Dating, Monday to Thursday on E4 and catch up on all 4.
In all of your novels, and this is, I didn't realise it was 5 years between the new one and the last one, but family is huge, isn't it? These interplays and these intricacies are what fascinates you, I think.
I think that's where my biggest fears are, is if family goes wrong.
Right.
If a mother has her eye off the ball and doesn't notice her kids are in trouble, or if there's any kind of violence or anything like that. And those are my worst nightmares, is anybody being massively unhappy inside a family. And, as a mum, I know that, it's trite, sounds trite to say it, but for me it's true, and I wish it wasn't, that you're only ever as happy as your unhappiest kid.
Yeah.
So you spend your whole time trying to make sure that everybody's, buffered by you.
And we've jumped ahead a bit. We'll just steer back. We'll skip college and come to the point where you sort of found yourself upon the fringes of what I think could be called accidental fame. Certainly you didn't have that desperation to be well known, or indeed you didn't really have much of an acting bug, but lo and behold, you're on the fringes of what must have been one of the coolest collections of people ever assembled.
Yeah, how blessed was I that happened. Yeah, absolutely. Because I certainly wasn't looking. But Jennifer, who had no intentions of being a teacher, was horrified at the thought of working with children.
So she just had to put something on the forms and do 3 years, fill in 3.
Absolutely, she did.
Right,
everything was a happy mistake for her. But Jennifer, by then, she was living a sort of Withnail and I life where she wasn't doing much, drinking champagne and smoking cigarettes with her posh friends. And she was looking at the Stage magazine, weirdly, to see what jobs. And I think she would have taken cleaning jobs, in theatres, anything. We did do a bit of usheretting, actually. We did that at the Roundhouse. And once we had to, oh gosh, it would make me remember this. Once when we were usherettes at the Roundhouse in the evenings when we were at college, Vanessa Redgrave was in The Lady from the Sea. And she had a very heavy scene where she had to rush out through the curtains, stand in a children's paddling pool, and we had to douse her with water so that she could return because she had been in the sea. And of course, we could not speak to her. And we were massively in awe of her and longing to chat to her about the Workers' Revolutionary Party. But but we had to keep our mouths shut and just douse her with water, and on she went again. It was hilarious. But anyway, where were we? I've forgotten where we were.
Accidental
college.
Fame. So,
At the end of college, that's right. And Jennifer and I, had a friendship. I was being a teacher. She was being with Neil and I. And she said, look, there's this place in Soho. There's a club and they're looking for double acts. We'd done a bit of mucking about in a college cabaret. Really, that's all we'd done.
In front of fellow students.
In front of fellow students, and we'd mainly done that because the college cabarets were always a place where the actors could show off. And we felt like us, the teachers, there was a paucity of interest in us. And we joined together to do a couple of, we did a couple of silly characters that we'd done in our flat to amuse ourselves. And we did it at that, really as the two fingers up to the actors who were big, massive, great show-offs. And so we had something we could take along to this audition. And that's what we did. And then I used to moonlight at night at the comic strip and then teach during the day. It was good. We were on a 5
bit when you realised you were good. I mean, you can't have just gone from faffing about college
that
cabaret.
took a bit of time because we really weren't very good.
Right. So why did they put you on the stage then at the comedy store?
Because we had tits, James.
Was it really that simple?
Really? I think it was. I think it was because it was so massively un-PC to have a lineup at that point without women in it, and there were hardly any women around. We had that job the minute we walked in the door. Didn't matter how bad or good we were. Just didn't matter. So we learned on the job. We were spectacularly bad.
Because this would be the era of, Alexei Sale, I suppose, being the first of the alternative comics. But then, Ade Edmondson and Rick Mayall and all of the others coming up. Alongside him or shortly behind
They were
him.
the gang.
But
they were the gang.
This is where I get uncomfortable as an interviewer, because you're actually, as you well know, you and Jennifer are quite brilliant as well together, and so I don't know that I completely buy this idea that you were sort of poor relations, or that you
seriously they had a sort of plan, and they had a bit of experience, and they knew a little bit about what they were doing. They even knew they were a sort of movement. They knew they were alternative. They knew to set up this club. They had gone down that route for several months before we joined on. And we were learning very quickly on the job and noticing this was a kind of hip thing to be part of. We weren't part of the creation of it. We landed in it when it was already, motoring along. And thank God for that. I mean, it was, imagine like being part of a group that was on in this little strip club in Soho, sharing dressing rooms with strippers. It was remarkable. Yeah. And we go on stage and we did our funny little sketches that we didn't really have a proper punchline for. But there in the audience is Jack Nicholson and Robin Williams and Dustin Hoffman and Bianca Jagger and a sea of ruffles from all the new wave pirates. We were suddenly in this hit.
Charming.
Yeah, but we couldn't. I was wearing A-line corduroy skirts at the time. We had to quickly catch up with the fashion. And we were very lucky, and I am eternally grateful for that.
And we interviewed Ruby Wax not a couple of weeks ago, actually, and I hadn't realised that is it fair to say that in many ways everything revolved around Rick Mayall? Was he the sort of maypole?
I think what Rick was the kind of golden boy.
Yes.
He probably was the funniest, although he and Ade together were even funnier than just Rick. But there was something very beautiful about Rick. Very good looking, extremely charming, very charismatic, a bit of a magnet, if you like. And he was the one that the most excitement was building. Channel 4 were interested in him and the BBC were interested in him. But Peter Richardson, who created the comic strip, was the one who steered it all, and he was the one who had the very good idea to create a little film company, really, and to take advantage of the fact that Channel 4 were prepared to be a bit braver.
I know a few comedians, and there's this curious tension, isn't there? Because having a plan, they all frown on it, and they'll name the comics, usually the big shot TV comics. Oh yeah, he had a plan. He had a plan. But actually, to hear you describe a relatively anarchic troupe, there was a plan, and the plan is probably the reason why you all ended up, partly the reason why you all ended up so far ahead of the field.
Well, I guess the plan was quite monetary, if anything, because to make the films we needed to make, somebody had to pay. And Peter Richardson noticed that Channel 4 was new and had some dosh and looking for interesting new gang of people. And he went and presented us to them. And you know what was great? They were completely hands off.
Yeah,
so we were allowed to go and create our own little film company where we were very cooperative. We all wrote them, we all directed them. There were a few little fights with the egos inside, but besides that, everybody was in everything. We all got paid the same. It was, it was good.
Do you have a favourite film from that era, or a favourite?
Oh my goodness!
Moment?
I think if I have to think of a sort of filmic moment, it would be Robbie Coltrane walking out with a great big, he had a chainsaw in what looked like a guitar case. What was the film? What was it? Oh, you'll have to check it out, James. I forget all the names.
It was for the edit.
Yeah, exactly. But he walked out on the breaker, on the Cobb in Devon, and a genuine storm was happening that came and lashed over him. And these were in the days when there was no health and safety whatsoever. He shouldn't have been doing that. He could have been swept away, except that he's a hefty chap, and he's got a bit of ballast, thank God. But when I asked him afterwards, why did you do that? He said, because the makeup women were watching. So he did anything in order to, show off to the makeup girls, including risking his ruddy life.
Fair play. Was there a moment?
It was in Supergrass. It was Supergrass.
Of course it was, yes. Yeah. Was there a moment, obviously my favourite, because of my age probably, Five Go Mad in Dorset, I couldn't believe my eyes when I first saw that. I stayed up. I used to have this little black and white television that Mum and Dad, I don't think they realised I could watch telly on it because I only used it to plug in my Sinclair ZX Spectrum. But obviously, after bedtime, you could actually, if you had a dial on it, not buttons, and you'd tune it like a radio, and I just stumbled across the Enid Blyton piss take, and I just felt everything. It was just breathtaking, and it makes me wonder when you realised this isn't just a sort of holiday from real life, this bizarre world that we stumbled into. When did you think, do you know what, this could be my real life?
Well, I think it was when I was forced to understand that I could make my living this way, because for the first year or so, I was still teaching during the day, and I had this secret life in the evening, which I couldn't own up to at school. And then a key moment came when the head of drama at the school that I was teaching at, which was Parliament Hill School for Girls, the head of drama had a bit of a breakdown, and the headmistress came to me, and I was only in my first provisionary, was it called, year. And she said, look, I'm going to need you to take over this department. So suddenly I was being offered the chance to skip all the steps, earn a really good wage, be the head of the drama department after 1 year. And yet I was also being offered the chance with the comic strip to go on tour to Australia. We were taking part in the Adelaide Comedy Festival. Wow. And nobody else had another job, so everybody else could go. And I didn't want Jen not to be able to go, and I really wanted to go, but I knew I had to give up my teaching job. So I went to see the... say again?
Why did you know you had to? Just because of the lure of the smell of the grease paint?
Well, it was really at that point, I thought I've either got to give up teaching and do this,
right,
or I've got to remain with teaching. I need to decide. And actually, rather pathetically, I didn't know how to decide, because teaching mattered a lot to me. I had kids doing exams. I felt very duty bound to stay with them. And now I had this other situation where the head was in a state. So the headmistress of the school called me in for a meeting to offer me this job. And I said, look, I have to tell you something. I've been doing this other job, and we've got the chance to go, oh, God, please forgive me, headmistress, don't spank me. And
like a secret cross-dresser or something like that.
I know, it was awful.
Desperate secret.
This is Mrs. McEwen, who I'm still grateful to, because really she needed me to say yes to the teaching job. And I think she thought, why wouldn't you go from being this baby teacher to a grown-up teacher in 2 seconds and have a pay rise of twice as much? But I told her my dilemma, and she just went a bit quiet, And she said, well, of course, you have to go on tour. Of course you do. So she said, I would never forgive myself if I stopped you, and you'd never forgive me. And so she gave me permission to give up teaching.
Wow.
And I think, I think if she'd said, you know where your duty lies, French, I would probably be a teacher now. Would.
Wow, that's a path not taken, isn't it? And I mean, to be pragmatic for a moment, you could always, if it all went belly up in Australia or even at the comic strip, then teaching was always going to be there, whereas you don't get many chances like that in your life. In fact,
no, that's true. Really do you know a weird thing? I still think that.
Do you really?
I do. I still think, oh well, if this all goes wrong, I'll go back to teaching. Go back to teaching. But except for I don't feel like it's back. I mean, teaching's left me well behind. I'd have to retrain now.
I suspect.
Do you know my dream thing?
Go on.
My dream thing is to go and be in a junior school and be that person who sits at the back, and any little kids who want to read come and sit with you, and you just read books all day long with kids that want to read. That would be my favourite thing to do in my dribbly, hairy old retirement. I'd love to do that. No kids will want to come and sit next to me.
We'll deal with all the offers. We'll pass them on. We'll edit them and pass them on to you.
Texts, WhatsApp, emails, calls, meetings, deadlines! Time to stop, relax and recenter. Take a little you time, because with a simple strike of a match and Zip Firelighters, you can let the daily stresses just float away. Be mesmerised by the warming, comforting glow of a real fire.
When it's cold outside and the nights are long, just give your fire some zip.
Available at all major retailers.
We're going to fast forward through all the stuff that everybody knows. So, comic strips of French and Saunders, meeting and then splitting up with Lenny Henry. But I'd like to just hear what your reflections briefly upon the problems of being a public figure, upon however ebullient you are, however secure you are, however well adjusted you are. It's weird to know that people are looking through your metaphorical keyhole almost all the time, I presume.
Yeah. I think it's the certain knowledge that you're nearly always going to be a disappointment to people because you're not going to perform. Certainly, I'm not going to perform for people when I meet them in the street, and I know they wish you would. And there's a part of me that thinks, oh, go on, Dawn, just do it. Just pull a funny face or do a funny thing, do a silly walk, whatever. But I just can't bring myself to do it. And I'm aware that it leaves people, the people pleaser in me wants to do it, but the real Dawn knows that it's rather undignified and it doesn't suit me well, and it's fake.
Yes.
So that dilemma I'm uneasy with, and I've discovered that as I've got older, I know myself better now, and I know that I'm a sort of semi-functioning introvert is what I am, and really very happy to be in my own company, happy writing, happy quiet. Yes. I can do all the big jazz hands. I can absolutely do it. I'm clever at it. I know how to be, and I love my friends and I love the collaborations that I've had, but really, really crawling back inside is an okay place for me, which is why the lockdown was all right. It was all right.
It was more than all right. And then again, briefly, given that semi-functioning introvert, when you read about your personal life in the pages of newspapers and it doesn't actually bear that much resemblance to reality, is that I don't know whether that's something you can ever get used to, or indeed whether it's something you ever should get used to.
No, it's a kind of bullying. I mean, the worst experience I had was when somebody wrote a whole book about me. Yes. I don't know if you've experienced that, but it's really odd, because I can kind of deal with almost anything, even inaccurate things about myself or people's opinions about me that I think, don't hold with that, but okay, that's your opinion. But when it spills out onto your family, when it affects your mum or your daughter or whatever, people that have not asked for it, and where it's unkind, I don't know how to protect my family against that, and I feel bad about that.
Well, I'm not sure anyone can. But that does lead us inexorably to Because of You, which is very much about sort of nature and nurture as well, very much about mothers and daughters. Do you want to do it from the publisher's discussion points? Shall we see how we get on with it?
Yes, why not? Let's see what they think we should be saying.
So because of you, Dawn French, is your first novel in 5 years. What did it feel like returning to fiction? And has your writing process or style changed from your last novel?
I can't believe they've given you pointers.
I don't know if I'm supposed to have told you this, but anyway, we're in there now. So has it? Answer the question, Dawn French. Has it changed your writing style?
I think I have definitely learnt my own voice a little bit. I was a little bit nervous when I started to write fiction. I mean, I wrote a biography, an autobiography. Yeah. I spoke to you about it, actually, years ago. And I think that's when I thought, oh, I like writing. I like the control. This is good. But when I started to write fiction, I think I was trying to be a bit rebellious. I didn't want anybody telling me how I should write, that it should be the classic form where you write chapters and people talk to each other. So I wrote books that were in the form of letters, diaries. I even wrote a book where the central character was in a coma, inert, so that everybody could speak in monologue. So I tried to find different ways to write. And I think what I've now done is slightly grow up as a writer and realize that it's okay to write this very traditional form. And in fact, it frees you. The very thing I thought it wasn't, I thought it would be shackles, it frees you to do anything. And so I've landed in that, definitely.
That's why they've become tropes, isn't it? Because they do actually provide you with the best... sort of like in the sense that the plot is what you throw to the reader while you get on with the real business of developing characters and writing stuff. There's a reason why some of those plot devices do feel well-trodden. Because they free up the writer so much.
It's like the classic. They knew they've worked it out for us. Here's the blueprint.
Yes, exactly.
Get on with it. It doesn't stop your imagination. It doesn't stop your form in any way. It just gives you a freedom. However, I would say that the other day I read Bernardine Evaristo's book and realised you can write a book without any speech marks in it whatsoever.
Incredible.
Now, that is my least favourite thing in books, is the he said, she said kind of, because you always have to describe how he said it or she said it.
It breaks the spell.
Oh, God, it's dull. It's so dull. And then you spend the whole time trying to find out how you can be more interesting about that. And then you look at some books, look at Road. There's a book with nobody tells you who's speaking at any point. Anyway, when I grow up a bit more, I'll learn how to do that.
That last question was one of mine. I didn't get that one off.
Oh, okay.
The novel is about mothers and daughters and explores ideas around nature and nurture. Is this a theme that you have thought about a lot?
Well, yes, of course, publisher. I have. I have thought about it. This is not an autobiographical book in any way. Nobody in this book is, and this is one of my stock answers, nobody in this book is anyone in my actual life. But, of course, I had a mum whose work was in social work, who was on adoption panels and fostering panels, and used to tell me that she'd stay up at night worrying about placing kids with the right families and so on. And then I adopted my own kid and went through a lot to do that. So, of course, I'm interested in it. I read a lot about it before my daughter turned up, and I worried a lot about it. And then, of course, I didn't read any more from the day she turned up. I didn't worry about that at all. But I do think that it's an interesting dilemma, and it's an interesting theme, if you like. It's a good thing to have. And in my book, a woman steals another woman's child and raises that child as her own. And like we were saying earlier, when it comes to family, this for me is like the worst imaginable thing that could happen is someone takes your child. I don't know how you survive that.
Yes.
And I don't even know how the woman who takes the child survives that, because of all the guilt and the shame and everything that goes with it. You have to suppress a lot of that in order to raise that child as your own and to live inside that lie. And I was interested in exploring all of that, really.
And briefly, because I'm adopted, I've told you that before. So on the sort of binary nature versus nurture, where do you lean? Or do you lean at all? Or is it different for every... It's different for every case, probably, isn't it?
It is different in every case. And it also depends how you're raised.
Yes, of course.
But, you're going to love your nurture more than your nature if you've been raised in a particular way, I guess.
And the quality of the nurture highlights some of the nature. Some of your nature
Yeah,
might have been suppressed by
exactly.
the wrong kind of nurture. So you could be here all day,
Exactly.
couldn't you? It's-
But I quite like the moral dilemma that I've tried to explore at the centre of this book, which is, has this child been raised in the right family
Yes.
by the woman who stole her? If she had remained in the other family, would it have been worse? In other words, was it right to steal her? And I've tried to write an empathetic character at the center of it who you could forgive for such an unforgivable thing.
Yes.
So that, again, none of us can decide this. None of us can know. And people have stolen other people's children in the past.
Or it's happened accidentally as well, hasn't it? So, because that's the other
Yes.
theme.
Yeah.
We follow Minnie from birth to kind of almost ready to leave school kind of territory. But the other thing it's about is who is she? What is identity? I think that's clear. I mean, who would I be if I hadn't? I've just written about this myself, actually. In mine.
Have you?
Yes, because I often find myself thinking, who would you be if you hadn't been adopted? I wouldn't be me, and yet I would be me. And I found.
Do you think any people that are raised by their natural parents ever think, who would I be if I had been adopted? I wonder if they ever do think that.
They used to romanticise it at school. You'd have people say, I wish I was adopted.
Well, I've certainly said that to my mum in my life. Or I've actually accused her before, saying, I cannot be from you.
There's no
This
way.
Can't be. I can't be
You
from your
stole me.
bones.
But it is-
can't be true.
When you think of it like that, it's the mother of all sliding doors, isn't it? It really
It is. It certainly is, yeah. But I think, there's a lot to be said for who steps up for you.
Isn't there?
That's what matters in the end, and I know this from my own daughter, and I know it from lots of people. And funnily enough, since I adopted my daughter, everywhere I go, I meet adopted people. They're everywhere, James.
Yes, I know. It's like a mask. As soon as you take it, everyone will tell you. I find that also oddly with fertility treatment. When I went public about having had fertility treatment, suddenly loads of people would come up to me and say, oh, we had that. I said, I've known you for 15 years. I'm godfather to your children, and you never told me that you had IVF, for God's sake. Is it because there's no shame? I think, shame is what cripples us. And if you're not ashamed of stuff that's happened to you, then you can be much healthier and much happier. The men in it are strong.
Right.
You write. Do you prefer writing men or women? I mean, the central characters.
Don't have a preference, really. I like writing baddies and goodies. I like that, and I've chosen in this book to write an irredeemably awful person. I gave him a little bit of he's a bad dad, and I gave him a little bit of background that might be a tiny explanation for how he's turned out to be the giant narcissist that he is. But he has every opportunity to change that and doesn't, and that to me is the bigger
redemption,
sin.
the opportunity
and I really
for redemption.
enjoyed writing him, really enjoyed it.
It's probably like playing. More fun to play a baddie than it is to play a goodie as well.
Definitely.
So it's a similar sort of process with writing.
I don't know how other writers do it, but I absolutely have to improvise all the people. I stand up and walk about, and I try and be them. I try and sound like them, which is always fairly pathetic.
Well, you should do a red button. You should film that. So it comes as an extra director's cut
that would
with
be
the book. It would be brilliant. No, it wouldn't. Rubbish. It'd be superb.
We got boosted for the team. Chris, pass the ball. I'm on.
We got boosted to get together. How have you been? You been all right? Gosh, I haven't seen you guys.
I got boosted because I don't want to get really ill.
We got boosted.
Join us. Let's get protected.
Over time, 2 doses do not give you enough protection against COVID-19. Get boosted now at nhs.uk/COVID vaccination.
Two more questions, because I know how busy you are, both from
That's
the
okay.
list. Both from the list. So much of what happens in the novel is down to fate. Do you believe in fate and destiny?
Oh God, do I? Do I believe in fate and destiny? God, don't know. Honestly, don't know the answer to that. Do you?
Well, I think if you answered yes, you'd almost be contradicting yourself, wouldn't you? Unless I knew you'd say that.
Yes. No, I don't.
No, I don't.
No, I
For the
don't.
reasons we've just discussed, because there's so many different paths, so many Robert Frost moments where the path.
So many.
Okay, final question. This is your second book to feature a hospital setting.
Okay, yeah.
What have you found?
Now, this is your fourth book that's got humans in it.
No, please stick to the script. What have you found fruitful about this as a location for your work?
Oh, ruddy hell. Well, the first time I wrote a person in a coma, so they had to be in a hospital, didn't they, you twits? Who have I put in the hospital here? Well, they only start off in a hospital because they're having a baby, you twits.
Where do we find these people? And that, I think that is it for this time. Every time I talk to you, I feel that it's ending before we've barely started. Because of You is out now. It's a novel that really looks at every aspect of family life, every aspect of nature, nurture, personal identity, but as you would expect, it's also incredibly warm and incredibly funny, just like you, Dawn French.
Thank you, James. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Take care.